How's it going, everyone? Welcome to the weekly trade review for the week of March 31st, if I go off the Monday. So, recording this a little bit inside the week here. Had a family wedding, and I came back on Monday, so didn't have time to record over the weekend, but wanted to get this video out today. So, in this prior week, I took 10 trades. I had 3 swings, and I had 7 day trades. So let's start with the market this week, and it was a very newsy week because Trump had the Liberation Day tariffs, and we had a rejection from the 200-day SMA, tested this overnight low, we got a bit of a bounce, and then we had a binary event on this day. Now, there was a negative reaction to the elections. There was a big gap down, and a big gap down on heavy volume will tend to stick, and then we had the market moving lower. So we had a gap and go, and then on Friday, another big gap and go down on that day. So pretty big sell-off over the week. And we were able to make some nice money. So I'm going to go over these swings first. The first swing I'm going to go over is Caesar. And let's pull this D1 chart up. So I entered on 328, which was last Friday. I took Caesar right over here. I took it at, I took the 30 puts for 470. Right towards the end of the day here at 340. So this is the setup on the market. This is set up on Caesar here. The market had broken down this upward sloping trend line. I wanted to see that kind of double top over here and then roll over, but I didn't quite get that. However, what I liked with Caesar was that we got this big move lower. And we kind of had this like wimpy bounce up that got faded pretty quickly. We broke through the low on a nice little compression break. So a nice entry would have been somewhere over, here around 2650 level. You can see a test of that level up on the second, and then we got the drop here on the third. So I held throughout this over here. We're getting a bounce, and on this binary event, I thought, all right, well, look, I don't love this bounce on Caesar, but my longer term market bias is bearish. I have some time on these puts, so I'm willing to hold them as long as the 200-day SMA holds, and Caesar is showing some relative weakness. I'm not going to overreact to one candle because we've seen some solos here get popped and then faded. So we got this gap down the next day, and then I exited Caesar at 610 or $6.10 on this drop lower fairly early in the day around 11 a.m. So let's zoom into this M5 price action just to see what that looked like. All right, so we had this big gap down, and on the big gap down, I had this nice, I was watching for one thing. So I wanted to see if we would retrace the gap, which means I'd see some maybe steady green candles in the first 15 minutes. We got this green candle, nothing here, and then we got a red candle right here. That's when I felt pretty good, and then we compressed here, broke the low of the day. We just started kind of grinding lower. And then once I start around 11:10 here, when the market started to find support, start to bounce up a little bit, this is where I took my gains on Caesar. And on the M5 chart, you'll see that it was gaining some relative strength on that day. So here's April 3rd. Or sorry, right here. So here's the drop on April 3rd. We're grinding up higher while the market is moving lower. So I got out over here when the price was around 24 bucks, and I took a nice win. I took about a 33% win on Caesar. So that was a nice win. Next, very similar situation was NTAP. So I took NTAP here on the 28th as well. I liked how we got this big drop lower, compressed for a while, which was normal, digesting the gains, but then it couldn't really rally with the market. Got back to its A VWAP E over here, and then broke through this downward upper sloping trend line and through this compression low. So I took NTAP. I took the 95 puts for $8.20, which was close to I took a 2.5 size position in terms of a max loss. So you can see that with both of these trades, I'm already kind of swinging, 4x total size. If you think about, 820 plus 470, that's 1290. If my max risk is $300 for a 1x size, ends up being 4x size here. So that's how I split it across my trades. And I like the setup. So a couple of days here, bounced up a little bit, and then we got the event on April 3rd, and really, really nice leg down lower on NTAP. My target here was about $80 if I could get that. And zooming in on this M5 chart, where is this setup? Yeah, so we got this gap and go lower. I loved how when the SPY tried to rally early, Caesar was stacking red candles, and then over here, and we kind of got a bit of a bounce. So I was just riding this trend lower, and then once it started to bounce, that's when I was going to take my gains. So was riding NTAP, and then I ended up exiting the trade around 11:15 when the market started to hold this long green candle, and Caesar was starting to rally on this long green candle and also hold it as well, losing a bit of its relative strength. So took a really nice win. I think I got out at $15. Let's see over here. I got out at $13.40. Got it at Caesar. And I exited this, at $11.20. So that was a really nice win. I think that was almost 70% on those puts, which was a beautiful win. And still had some continuation the next day. So if I had a bigger size, I would have scaled out a little bit more. But I would have definitely taken some partial gains on this day. And if I continued, I'd let it go on. But big gap and go. And I felt that I didn't know if the market had more downside or not. I just knew that at that moment, the market had made a pretty big drop. I knew it was going to stick for this day. I didn't know if we were going to rally back up or not. And then next day, I definitely would have been starting to take some gains on that drop on the 4th. So nice win on that stock. And the last swing trade I took was MRK. So I took this trade on the 1st. Let's go to this chart. MRK. And I took it on the 1st. It was a good setup. It was selling while the market was rallying. I took a 1x size because I didn't want to put on any additional exposure risk before the Liberation Day because that's a binary event. That was the last amount of risk I was willing to add. So I took it at 87.01. I just did shares, 50 shares at 87.01. The puts would be too expensive. It would be too much risk for me in terms of the size. And so we got the pop up over here. We had some follow through and then a pause. And then when the market gapped down on the 3rd, this stock actually gapped up and then started to sell off and fill in the gap. So I didn't love that gap up, and I ended up exiting that day for pretty much a tiny loss at 87.67. So where is MRK? Yep. So it filled in this gap, and then I exited, where is this coming up? Right around over here, kind of around VWAP. I exited when we got this tall bounce from the gap fill. So I was in profits a little bit, but wasn't really sweating it because, didn't really do what I wanted to do. I thought the market made a pretty big move and the stock didn't participate. So I got out of that stock and I didn't know it would rally back down. It did end up rallying back down and would have been a nice winner holding on to it. But I was a pretty good profits overall on this day, so I was fine with just taking gains on the swing position, and then we got the bottom falling out of the market on the next day. So a lot of these you can say, hey, well maybe you should have held the next day, but I didn't really have the confidence, or I didn't have the strength in the forecast to hold the next day, especially when these bear market bounces can come out of nowhere, right? We could get a gap down and then another big rally up. So I'm happy to take some gains into strength. I might miss another big move lower, which I did, right? There was another, from this 530 candle, we got another pretty big drop, and the market dropped about another $30, even actually to a low of that. And then you can see that today it had a big rally on that news, and pretty much erased all of those losses relating to the Liberation Day tariffs. We're back pretty much right at that gap on SPY. So you might feel like, again, you missed out on taking some big profits into this drop, but it's really hard to time the bottom, and I'm okay with these big gains on this drop over here. I'm not going to perfectly get every drop. It's hard to know when to push an extra amount and when to kind of scale back. Okay, so now that we have that, let's talk about the day trades I took this week. So let's just zoom into the M30 chart this week, look at some of the general structure that we saw. So we started off with a gap down on the 31st. Market rallied up, rallied up, rallied up, rallied up, and then, had a decent rally. We got the news that hit, gap and go down, close near the low of the day, another gap and go down that we just steadily trickled for the entire day on the 4th. So lots of volume. Can be difficult trading conditions, especially when the volatility really ramps up. But we had a weak bounce, and then we had a strong leg lower. So starting on the 31st, only trade I took that day was MSTR. All right. So gap down. The market had a, kind of a okay-ish rally. It had some directionality. You can see that we have red candle gobbled up, red candle gobbled up. So buyers are in control, but there's sellers kind of just pounding it at every little level here. We stalled for a bit. This is where you might see some sort of reversal, but we never quite got through the low of this green candle, and then that actually fueled the next leg up higher in the rally. So on this day, I took a short on MSTR, and I took it right at on this 145 candle right here. Now MSTR on that day, you can see it's actually one of the stronger stocks. It's kind of in this range. It's holding its 200 SMA pretty well. And where's the 31st? 31st is here. So there wasn't like a ton of, really, to me, first of all, this should have been a no trade. Was not the best setup to begin with. It's not the setup that I like to trade, right? I'd rather see something like this is a bit better. Breaks that compression low, falls out. But market is up for the day, and I took MSTR short right over here on this candle, and I took it before the candle closed. Now, what I was looking at here was, okay, well, we got the market dropped down and rallied. This stock dropped down and rallied, then stalled at its AVWAP for quite a bit over here, and then started to sell off that level at test VWAP. So I like that. But I took it here when it did not close below VWAP. You can see it held this level, and I got the market wrong. So market ended up rallying. This stock ended up rallying, and then I took the loss at 210, the close of this candle, when we got this green bar that basically got back above this long red candle here. We closed above it, and then we held it. That told me that, all right, we're probably going to go higher. And I was wrong about the market. Market's going to go higher, so I got out of the trade. So in terms of exiting the trade, I think I did a great job. In terms of actually taking the trade, should not even enter the trade in the first place. Not my setup. And I didn't have the right entry candle to go short on this guy. So that was MSTR. Only trade on that day. Next one was CF. Let's look at this chart. I took CF on April 1st. So it was breaking out of this compression. And again, not the strongest D1 chart, but there's not a ton of super strong guys out there. I like this hold over here. It didn't rally when the market was dripping lower. And then it broke this compression today. It also didn't rally drop the last couple of days when the market was selling off. So those are all good signs just for a day trade. All right, so here's what I liked about this day trade. Market down and then started to rally up and then stalled over here. And then we started to see a later day sell-off that eventually found some support, and then we started to rally. Now CF dropped down and it moved up higher. I liked how it was kind of falling similar to the market, but this was a much stronger move. And you can see that when the market started to drop at 12.25. Here's CF at 12.25. I was like, okay, I was waiting for the market to dip, which it did. So it dipped, and then it started to bounce over here. So at 12.50, I was like, hey, look, we got this. We got a little bit of a sell-off here, but then we held while the market was sinking lower. Let me move this over here so we can see both. While the market was sinking lower, this stock was holding its own. So I got in at CF at 79.42. So market on this bounce, I was like, all right, look, if it holds VWAP, I'm in good shape. And held VWAP over here, broke down through here, and then it stalled for a little bit. So I'm holding this trade, and I see this breakdown over here. Now at 2 o'clock, I'm seeing, okay, well, yeah, look, we're testing this low right here, but it's actually holding up pretty well at 2 o'clock, right? Market is selling off. This stock, yeah, it got pulled down a little bit, but it's holding up really well. So I know that this is two-sided price action. Buyers were strong today. Sellers are taking their shot right now. Once this finds support, I'll have my chance to get out of the trade. So I'm just waiting. I have this alert line drawn over here, so when it starts to break through that, I can even consider adding to the trade if the market is looking good and the stock is looking good. So we start to find some support. We're starting to rally off here at 255. And now market's not really rallying, but I'm going to give it some time here. It's working its way up to VWAP. And I believe I exit this trade at 12.46. So I exit this trade right over here. It comes back to scratch, but I exit it at 79.36 for a pretty tiny loss. This is a 6-cent loss on this guy. Pretty good considering that the market was down. This stock ended up being flat, and it would have been a winner had I held to the end of the day, but you know, it's hard to kind of predict what's going to happen in those last couple of candles. So I was fine with scratching out of the trade. I thought this was a pretty good pick. I thought I weighted pretty well in terms of syncing with the market. I just got the market wrong, but I knew that it wasn't going to be totally over because we knew that there were buyers here and they would have to take out the slow of the day for me to feel like I am in trouble. Next trade I took on 4-2. Now 4-2 gap down. We had a pretty nice steady day of bullish price action. Then we saw sellers come in and smack this down later in the day, testing VWAP until finally we got a little bit of a bounce. So there was some two-sided price action. I think there was an opportunity to take a trade maybe earlier in the day as we start to make a new high of the day, test this level, start to build some support. This was a nice meat of the move that you could catch. Stock I traded on this day was Court. And I took Court on 4-2. So this is not my typical short. And I think this was an okay trade. It was not the best trade, but I had a good game plan, and that's what got me out of a sticky situation. All right. So market's up. I know that sellers have shown their hand over here, and I am watching for sellers to show some weakness. So I see this red candle off the high of the day. I see another red candle of follow through, and I'm thinking, all right, this might be a decent time to take a relatively weak short. So I'm looking over here, and I find Court. Oop. Sorry about that. I got a call from my boss. So the next trade I took, I was talking about Court, and I was talking about how the market was inching up. So I took Court short at 11.45 when we got this nice leg lower. It was kind of chopping around here. It poked above its VWAP on this candle, and then a big door slam at 11.40. And at this point, SPY was coming off its high of the day over here. So I think it was a good stock entry. It was, in terms of syncing with the market, it was cycled pretty well, but I was not trading with the trend. I was trading against the trend, and this was a little bit anticipatory. So I needed to have a good game plan. And SPY rallied up to a new high of the day. This stock rallied a little bit, but then didn't really do a whole lot. And after about 1 hour at 12.45 is when I scratched out of the trade because I was wrong about the market. Right, and here's the market at 12.45. I was watching to see, okay, maybe, it's going to be a marginal new high, but, we got over here. We're still holding this level. And this stock, it's held pretty well, but market's still looking pretty bullish at this point. So figured to scratch out of the trade, and then another trade might set up later in the day. So it's a pretty decent trade overall, but I think that I was, again, a little bit anticipatory, and I would have rather actually traded the long side on this little dip versus trying to force the short side over here. Second trade I took on 4-2 was MRK. Let's look at this D1 chart. So here is, here's the break on April 2nd. And we had some follow through after I went short actually as a swing trade the day before. So I have a swing trade on and a day trade on, and ended up taking the puts on this stock because I did not want to what's it called? I didn't want to take shares, and then my average cost is kind of a change and it's a little bit wonky, so I just took the puts. So I took the 4.11.90 puts for 4.45, and I took this trade at 110. So when it started to break down through this compression low, so this was the setup I saw. It was really nice relative weakness. It had a pretty tall bounce, and it had come back below VWAP, compressed, and then broke that compression to the downside. A 110 SPY was getting pretty climaxy, and then it started to actually stack some nice red candles on this move lower. So when we got those red candles, MRK started to rally up higher, and it wasn't really getting knocked down. I knew this is kind of a divergent stock, so when the market starts to rally, this stock might start to move higher. This also had some pretty strong buying earlier in the day. So I didn't know if we would actually test low of the day, or if we would have maybe a higher low. So I exited this stock at 140 for a small loss. But this honestly, I think, should have been a no trade. I took this trade because Pete took the trade, and I like the setup, and it was a decent setup. But if I look at where I entered, it's just, to me, a little bit too predictive. Right? I'm really trying to call this top here on SPY at 105 right here before the market has had a chance to roll over. So that's the second trade where, again, I'm looking for a short, but I'm not quite getting the market to roll over. Now, even when I got the market to roll over, this stock ended up not performing, and it worked better as a swing trade. So that was already 2 trades today where I think I shouldn't have taken the trade to begin with. That's Court and MRK. So I finally did redeem myself with this last trade on Snow. So let's look at this guy. So Snow was actually trading with the trend, and when the market pulled back over here, had a deep pullback to VWAP, Snow was actually holding its support pretty well and compressing for a little bit. And then when it started to break that compression at 235, that is when I entered the trade. So on this break of compression, I got in on Snow at 154.46. And it had some room to its AVWAP-E, so it was a little bit higher on the chart. I felt that it had a room to maybe poke through the high of the day, but wasn't looking for anything crazy. 154.46 was looking for maybe $1 or so on the stock. So market over here, poked through VWAP, came back again, another test, another long green candle. This is telling me that support is starting to form over here, and that I can take. I feel comfortable holding my positions at 3. Now market is kind of pitter-patting around, still not really rallying. You can see Snow, it's holding and hugging right at the high of the day, pokes above it at 330, and we'll finally get the market start to rally again at 330, and then we get a final little pop over here at 340, and that is when I have pretty much $1 on the trade is what I'm targeting. So I hit my $1 on the trade, and I get out for a nice $1. So I think this is the only trade I should have taken today, because it was strong with the market. I got a market pullback, and then Snow held the gains, and then we started to rally up higher. All right, the next trade I took is Team, and I took this stock on 4-3. So as I mentioned earlier in the video, 4-3 was a gap and go trend day. And I wanted a stock that was weak, but also didn't just drop completely. I wanted something that was at least somewhat close to resistance. And there's a lot of stocks that were overextended that made giant moves. I didn't feel like chasing in here, but I like Team. And you can see how at a gap down, it is getting through that horizontal support as well. So I can lean on that as resistance once it started to break through that. So let's look at that M5 chart. All right, so this was Team. Nice, steady red candles. You can see we had some red candles early while the market was getting over here. And I took this short at about 10.10. So right over here, I took the short at 201.25 because market had broken through the low of the day and Team was steadily drifting lower. Had a nice entry at a bit of a bounce, and then we had a pretty nice sell-off down over here. Market started to find some support. Team started to rally up a little bit. And this first candle, green candle, I was still okay with at 11.10. And then at 11.15, we got another green candle over here on Team. So that told me that I needed to get out of the trade. So I got out of the trade over here at 11.20 at 199.25 or 199.15. So about a $2 win on that stock. Had a potential to be. I was originally targeting, 194 ish, something like that. There was a little bit of a gap fill support coming into play, but I didn't want to pull the plug super early. But when I got this candle here, I was thinking, okay, look, when I'm chasing the middle of this move, so I can't let it run too much against me. I'm gonna wait to see what happens, and lo and behold, team had another nice, I think, good shorting opportunity right here at 210. Market started to roll over. It's testing this below VWAP. It has some relative strength here, so I'm not sure if I would have taken it at this point. But if I just look at the way the stock has moved, poked above VWAP, and then we got a big door slam, and we got a bit of a move lower. You can see that after this door slam, it didn't really move anywhere when the market trickled lower. So there was, I think, a probably better shorting opportunity in the market. Probably somewhere here, 542 on this rejection off of VWAP. Nice short to the low of the day, and you had maybe $2-3 in there. All right, now on 4-3, that was 4-3. Sorry. So I didn't take any other trades in 4-3. I was traveling that day. On the 4th, I was not in my usual circumstance, so I didn't trade team. One thing I was looking for on SPY was any sort of capitulation low. So we had the pattern that did set up. We got this gap and go. After another gap and go down, some nice steady price action early, and then 3 stacked green candles on good volume over here at 11. So that was the scenario I was waiting for. Now, I think Pete took this trade a little bit earlier. For me, I noticed that on these capitulation lows, they will always get above VWAP. They might retest it and bounce off, or they might compress on it for a while and then bounce off. So VWAP was my line. So as soon as I crossed VWAP over here, I took a starter position. I was day trade at 518.70. I was long over here. So I went long SPY then, and I added to the position at 521.65. So my average was 520.18. So it was looking good. I liked how the stock was holding above VWAP over here. We had that test and we climbed higher. I would like to see a little bit of a more aggressive move here, but I still like what I saw. And then not a ton of follow through on this guy. And then we got this long red candle. Now, this was the first warning sign. We usually do not dip below VWAP. So the fact that I even got this candle means that the chance of a capitulation low and a bounce is probably not likely today. Then when this candle did not immediately get back above in the range, that told me that, okay, chance for testing the high of the day. High of the day could be in today. So I should be pretty cautious over here. But my stop was the low of the day. So as long as the low of the day held, I was fine with trying to get out of my position. So held. And we got a nice trickle down to the low of the day because we couldn't get above VWAP. And we're right above it. And we get this poke. So on this poke below, this is where I actually take the loss on this guy. So take a decent loss on this, maybe $10 loss. I added, but I had a pretty wide stop because my stop was the low of the day. So in terms of total shares and max loss, this was only about 2/3 of a max loss. So I could kind of eat away at it. SPY did have another bounce here and then sold off later in the day and broke through that low of the day. So looking back on this trade, I think the warning sign was to get out over here, 516, 517, when I was still take a tiny little hit and then get to the sidelines. I was kind of hopeful over here, and then when it broke through over here, right, still kind of trading a little bit of hope that, all right, well, maybe we'll break through. When in reality, on this breakdown here, this is a pretty nice shorting opportunity in the market. Weak bounce, couldn't break pro VWAP. So short over here, you can take gains probably at the low of the day, and then wait for your another short, and then right over here, another breakdown. I would start to take gains here. I was enter another short, and I'll get out for some nice profits over here. And that's a pretty nice win you could probably have taken in SPY. There's probably $3 there, probably another $5 there. Just day trading this guy. So I think I followed my plan well, which was good. The problem was, I think with this plan was to get out very early, and because it was maybe a little bit anticipatory, I kind of hopped on here initially. I liked my entry. I don't love my ad. I think I added a little bit too quickly. And because I added a little bit too quickly, I just didn't quite. I took kind of maybe a bigger loss than I should have. So that was the only thing I really have gripes with the trade, but I like the entry. I had my pattern. I struck when I saw it. Just wasn't the time for this guy. So live to fight another day. That was the trades this week. So if you saw my Q1 video, I'm tracking my weekly performance. So on this week, I believe, I'll pull up the stats right here. Nice. So this week I had about a 1% gain in the account, made $341. So green week, off to a good start for Q2. Still under that $600 target, but on a financial goal wise, one of my goals is to win every week. So won this week, which is good. Now my second goal was to get a 75% win rate. I had 4 wins and I had 4 losses. So 50-50. There was a couple of trades that I could trim, namely and one of them was a swing trade. MSTR and my MRK day trade, they should have been gone. So I think those two are trades that I shouldn't have taken, flat out. And then my SPY trade, I think I made a mistake on the ad, which brought the P&L down a little bit, but that still would have been a loss overall. So yeah, that's what I saw. That's what I saw this week, but I had some nice wins in my swings, and that was green for the week. And had a couple of little day trades I could clean up. So I think a good week, but there's some opportunities for me to improve, and that's what I'm bringing to the table for this week. Trying to nail in that 75% win rate as much as I can, and focusing on my streaks in terms of syncing with the market and entering the stock well. Outside, my MSTR was a bad entry, not sync with the market, and I took a couple of trades like that with COF and CORT that were unsynced. I think starting with Snow, Team, and SPY, I had a nice streak going with those 3 day trades. So that's my streak, and then I'm continuing that this week. So I will reveal that when this week is done. But overall, good start, and I'm going to try to keep it going for Q2. So thank you for watching, everyone, and I will see you all in the next weekly trade review.